Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into the start of Division III programming here for the 2020 COSIDA Virtual Convention. We're so excited for what we've got ahead today, talking about marketing yourself. I'm Danielle Percival. I'm the Assistant AD of Communications here at Piedmont College, entering my 7th year here at Piedmont.
Yeah, I'm Matthew Fenton. I'm the Director of Athletic Communications at Messiah College in my 2nd year here at Messiah.
And I'm Sean Medeiros. I'm in my 5th year as a Sports Information Director at Endicott. Go Gulls.
We're excited about all that we have ahead. We've got a star-studded guest list with us today for our panels and our different topics. Matthew, tell us what we've got to look forward to kick things off.
Yeah, so originally, before all of this COVID-19 business, we were hoping to kind of break the framework of what a divisional day might look like, particularly around not just having panelists sit up front. You don't get to interact with them. We wanted to kind of bring those sessions to you and have some small table discussion. Things have changed a little bit. We've had to go virtual, so we're going to make the best of our situation. We're kind of on plan B or C at the moment. But what we're going to do is have a presentation here that you're going to watch on YouTube, this recording, and then we're going to jump into some breakout rooms where you can sit with our panelists, ask them follow-up questions, ask us some questions if you have any, and kind of dig into our topics. We don't want this to be an information dump. We want this to be interactive and really conversational. So super excited about the format we've got. We got 45 minutes to an hour for our video, and then we'll do some small table discussions coming up here in just a few minutes.
And first up, we're talking resumes and cover letters. Matthew, who joined you today?
Yeah, we have Sam Atkinson from Gallaudet and Clark Tusher from North Central, just chatting about resumes, talking about interviews, the interview process. It's going to be a little bit of a twofold conversation. First, talking a little bit about how SIDs are out in the industry looking for new jobs, what to focus on your resume, what to focus on in an interview or cover letter, and then changing the topic just a little bit and speaking around what are you looking for in somebody to join your office, whether that be a graduate assistant, an intern, or work study. We kind of got both sides of the coin there in our 15-minute discussion, but super excited to break out and ask some follow-ups to both of them and hear a little bit more about their perspective and their opinions from a number of years in the industry.
And Sean, what do we have to look forward to next in our discussion?
So we'll talk to Michael Smoose from Johnson & Wales University in Rhode Island. We'll talk about how he navigated being an assistant sports information director all the way up to an interim AD, actually was an interim AD at 2 spots. So just talking about value that SIDs bring to the table, getting that promotion, just kind of navigating those conversations with, your AD and maybe upper administration at your college or university. And to echo Matt's point, you'll get through the sections where everyone goes through talking with the guests, but we really want that second portion to be super interactive. So as you're going through the video, write down questions, be prepared when we get into those breakout sessions. We want to kind of hit the ground rolling and have our guests who are going to be available to speak with to just kind of get right into it and start really interacting with all of you.
And our final topic is going to be marketing yourself, talking about building your personal brand. And joining me is Katie Mooji of the Missouri Valley Conference, of course, someone who has really successfully built a personal brand. So someone who's definitely got a lot of insight to share with us. We're excited to have her with us as well. And as we've talked about, really the most important part of this is the engagement. And we really want you to make the most of this opportunity, jump back and forth between rooms. I mean, obviously, you're going to need to be able to spend a little bit of time and dedicate to each one. But if there's one that interests you the most, spend your time there. But if you want to kind of jump around and ask different questions of different panelists and presenters, be sure to do that. Make the most of this time. So without further ado, let's get this thing started.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I am here with a couple of esteemed panelists that I am very excited to be sitting down with for a couple of minutes. Clark and Sam, if you guys wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves for a couple of minutes, and we'll get underway.
Hi, I'm Clark Tusher. I'm the Sports Information Director at North Central College. We're a Division III institution in Naperville, Illinois. I'm wrapping up year number 12 at North Central and year number 18 in the sports information industry.
Hello, everyone. Sam Atkinson, Associate Athletic Director for Communications at Gallaudet University, finishing my 11th year at Gallaudet. and 14th in the industry, and also CASIDA's first vice president.
Fantastic. Clark and Sam, excited to have you on. We're talking a little bit today about building yourself outside of just sports information, but marketing yourself. And some of that goes into the interview process, the cover letters, to resumes. And we kind of want this conversation to be a little bit twofold. I know we don't have tons of time, but would love to talk about how sports information professionals talk about themselves. And then on the flip side, how do you hire? What's that process look like? We're always looking for good talent from student workers and folks floating through our office. And so we kind of want to touch on both of those. And we'll start off maybe knowing that we have these transferable skills. We gain them all the time. Even amongst these tough situations, we're gaining skills and impactful ones. How do you highlight those skills on a resume or in a job interview or on a cover letter even? How do you make them pop off the page?
I think to start with, there's a practice that a lot of us should be doing on a consistent basis, which is quantifying the effect that the initiatives that you put into place have. Are you realizing a rise in engagement because of a specific strategy? Are you raising revenue? Are you saving costs? What are the measurables behind some of the things that you've been doing? Those are important things to track so you can keep in front of the decision makers at your institution, but it also benefits you when it comes to time to put it on your resume because you have those details ready, and those details really are what's going to stand out to a hiring manager who may be looking for one or two specific metrics to determine who they're going to be bringing on board in that position. So having those measurables, tracking them, making sure they're reliable, and in a succinct way, making sure that you highlight that in your resume as well as your cover letter, is a really easy advantage that you can give yourself.
I really think too, and Clark hit on a lot of key things right there, but with your resume, you need to create a standout summary early on about who you are and what you've accomplished. And, I know a lot of us in this industry shy away from, talking about some of the great accomplishments we've done, but adding to what Clark mentioned about, quantifying and knowing the data and the analytics of certain things that you've accomplished will go pretty far in that process to stand out to hiring managers. Adding those accomplishments in a bullet format to kind of stick out, or that's basically your backbone of your resume. You kind of want to use like an action verb, task, and a result to try to formulate what those bullet points will be.
Yeah, that's a really important point to make there, because you understand that when you're hiring a full-time position in this industry, it's so competitive, and you're going to get, as a hiring manager, 50, 60, 70 resumes to go through. You have to have an efficient means of finding out the information that you want. If you can't make it readily available, then you're going to get passed over. So it really is important to understand that you're in a zero-sum competition here, and you need to make sure you're putting your best foot forward and making it easily visible for anybody who's looking for it.
Yeah, I know for me, it's always been about updating that resume often. Even if you're not in the job market or looking for one, looking for a new role, just keeping track of all those things. And Clark, I think you hit the nail on the head of just trying to keep track of the tangibles. And if you don't update often, then you forget the tangibles very quickly. Moving kind of past that resume. Oh, sorry, was there?
No, I was just going to add real fast, and just getting Clark's opinion too. Clark, what do you feel about busy resumes, people that maybe make it too stand out-ish as far as graphics and designs? To me, I always kind of like a less is more type approach, and not as cluttered. But I know some people try to make their resumes pretty fancy.
If I'm hiring someone for whom graphics are a priority, I would rather see some other sort of published work that you've done than a frilly resume. I would rather have at the easiest time in the world finding out what you're good at and where I can go see it than have to hunt through your resume, because odds are I'm not going to be hunting very long for it, because particularly in a situation where you're hiring for full-time and you're having to go through a lot of those. So if you want to show off your design chops, I would rather have you put a link in there to where I can go get it.
And I feel like too, Matt and Clark, if people are going through a job application process right now, and it's going through an HR department more so than the sports information office, you need to make sure you're using the right keywords and phrases of those job descriptions and make sure you get past the ATS, which is usually an applicant tracking system that a lot of HR offices use. So keep that in mind too when you read those job descriptions. Utilize those keywords that they're emphasizing there.
Yeah, if you're a hiring manager, they can do a lot of the front end work for you and make it a lot easier for you. That's an excellent point.
That was great advice. So let's say you get through that ATS system and you've landed the interview. What tips are you thinking about in preparation for that interview? And then even on interview day, you walk in and let's say I'm interviewing with you, Sam. I sit down. What do you want to see from me? What's the thing that stands out?
First thing, Matt, is just, know what you're getting into. I think a lot of people sometimes are just, applying to every single job that they see out there. And they're not even really maybe seeing if it's a good fit. So do your research about that school, about that program, about that office. I think a lot of us who've been in this industry long enough can kind of see sometimes the same schools have the same openings year after year or every other year. And to me, that's usually a warning sign that, either it could be a stepping stone for some people in the industry and they move on, but there also more than likely is like some, there's smoke, there's fire. So there's there might be an issue at that office, that department, that school. So you need to do your research and keep a pulse of what's going on in the industry. I think that's very important. The other thing when you get into that interview setting is you got to know your accomplishments and you got to know some of the set questions. We always know, like, what's your strengths, what's your weaknesses, why would you be a good fit here? But you need to be able to answer those questions efficiently and be ready to, brag about yourself, but in a humble way.
Yeah, along those lines, I really want to see that you've prepared for telling me why you want to work with me, and be prepared with some questions, with some informed questions, and be familiar with the things that we do well and the things that are important to us, and how you might fit into that. A lot of the interviews, for me at least, start with the same questions. What do you know about us? And of the things that you mentioned, what are the strong points? What are the ones that you think that you can fulfill for us and be an asset to us? And then we kind of, move along based on how that goes. But yeah, I really want to know what you've taken the time to learn about our operation and where you think you fit in.
And I think we all dread too the questions that we get as far as, give us a situation and then you have to respond to it. And, a system that I've learned and like is what they call a STAR answer, as far as setting up the situation, your S, what's the task that you were, had to do with that, and what was the action that came out of that, and then what was the final result. So I think if you take that type of approach to try to answer those type of situational questions, it will kind of give that hiring manager a sense of how you tackle a project, a problem, how you went about it, what was the action to get to the result, and what were the final results from that. And I think, Clark, you can probably speak to this too, but, I love getting those follow-up emails, letters, just, even a LinkedIn message saying, thank you for the opportunity. I'm not sure about your experience, Clark, but what do you think about that as far as making sure you follow up within, a
I
set
think
amount of time?
I think it's great. I think it's a good professional step. And I think, that reflects an understanding that, there's a chance, even if you don't get that job, to create a networking contact, and you want to leave a good impression on that front. And it's also an opportunity for you to leave a little bit of a leave behind, whether it's a website that you contribute to, or some additional published work that you've done. You can use that as part of that, as a little bit of a leave behind it. Hey, in case you want to see more, here you go. So there's opportunity there to make yourself stand out even a little further. So yeah, I do support that practice wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I agree. I think the follow-up email or note's a great way of showing the intentionality of, hey, I chatted with 20 people. Here's one little thing I took away from each one. And you can cycle back and show that you're actively listening and following up on all those things. But I love the STAR answer. For me, I always want to think of 5 or 6 stories that I need to get out during the day, whether those be the accomplishments, whether those be just special situations. These are the things that have to come up, even if I'm not specifically asked about it. Those are really, in my mind, those are the key things that I always think about. kind of want to flip the table around a little bit and talk about what you're looking for in student workers, as well as graduate assistants in the interview process. How are you going about finding assistants and quality assistants in your office? I know both of you have worked with plenty of folks over the years. Some great, some okay, some maybe not so much. But how do you find that superstar talent, and what are you looking for in those folks?
Well, for us, I mean, it's a lot of different strategies. Certainly, like most everybody, we're required to list our positions on a general job board on the college's website. And we'll talk to certain professors. We have programs like interactive media studies and graphic design here on campus at North Central, where we're fortunate to be able to pull people with a certain amount of technical expertise. But also a lot of it comes from, word of mouth from either our current students, which right now we're like 12 to 15 on average student workers in and out of the office. Based on recommendations from them, they might be teammates with somebody, coaches certainly, if they hear somebody has a certain interest area, we'll inquire and ask if we're looking for help. And so they come from a lot of different places. Everybody interviews with me when they come in. And really the first, few questions there really aren't about the job. It's about them. Okay, well, what are you studying? What do you want to do with that? What do you know about what this office does? It's okay if the answer is not very much, particularly if they're new to campus. And find out, if there's some way that what they want intersects with what you need. That's always going to be the ideal situation, because you're going to get maximum effort out of that person. They're going to be all in. They're going to be volunteering for every extra job that comes up. We all have extra jobs that come up. And those people who are going to start out with a vested interest, they start out with that for themselves, but then it ends up being able to contribute to a group effort with a group of ours that really has worked well together, and they do a good job of letting me know, if certain people are pulling their weight or not. So finding people that work with that group really is kind of the primary thing. And then I start to look at, okay, well, what else, what experience do they have? What skills do they have that we can plug in and kind of develop a little bit? So they come from a lot of different places.
Just to add to that, I think, just kind of like our head coaches of our athletic programs, SID needs to kind of be our own recruiter on our campus. And like Clark mentioned, working with your, if you have a journalism professor on campus, or the communications department, multimedia, those are great starts to reach out to. I know every fall at Gallaudet University, we have a student work fair, job fair. We have a booth there to kind of recruit students that way. But for the most part, the student athletes are a great resource for us. And we're able to hopefully recruit some younger students as far as freshmen and sophomores, and then you're willing to teach them and mold them into a good SID student worker by maybe the third or fourth year, that maybe one or two could lead into a grad assistant position in the future. I also, you might also want to reach out to other universities that might be near your campus. We worked a lot with Georgetown University here in DC to recruit from their sports industry management master's program. And that's been great too, to bring in different perspective, with your different type of student workers or interns that might be available.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think for me, it's there's always these three questions that I look at, and it's the get it, folks that understand what we do and how we do it, the want it, so that desire to dive into how we're doing it, and then the capacity to do. So can they actually tangibly do what we're doing? And that's a principle out of, I think it's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. But for me, those are just, I think about it for GAs, I think about it for interns, student workers, even myself. Do I understand what we're doing? Do I want to do it? And then can you actually do it? Those are what I'm always thinking about. But I'm keeping a track of our time, and I think we're running a little bit long here. And I want to leave some time for our other panelists and some other interviews. But before we leave, is there anything from either of you that we didn't get a chance to touch on that you just wanted to bring up in regards to interviewing, cover letters, before we go into our Zoom session here in 20 minutes or so?
I think just, a lot of the things, you're going to have a good resume if you have good daily habits. If your daily habits are quantifying your work, putting it in front of other people, making sure it's accurate and reviewed well, taking the time to update your resume as it's fresh in your mind, and you're best able to put that into a sellable format, and make sure you're ready. That way, once you hit the job market and you're ready to actually seek employment, you're going to be a step ahead of the game. So definitely, just like we do for everything else, making sure that you're prepared when the time comes is really important.
And to add to what Clark just mentioned there, I think for a lot of us in this industry, for making sure that we have our, your resume updated, but also, update your bio and your website. And there's so many SIDs. You click on there, there's no bio, there's no picture. To me, especially if you're going for a job, you need to market yourself and not be bashful in that regard. We need to know who you are and what is your background. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. You need to be where the hiring managers are. The last thing was this, don't get discouraged. And I know it's a difficult situation that we're in currently, and it's probably not the best time for people looking for positions, and especially if you're trying to move around in this profession right now, but not to get discouraged and to keep trying, and have that confidence in yourself. Because if you don't have confidence in yourself, who will have confidence in you? So just think about that when you're going through the process, and wish everybody the best of luck with everything.
Absolutely.
All right, we're here with Michael Smoos, the Associate Athletics Director of Communications and Operations at Johnson & Wales University in Rhode Island. During today's conversation with Michael, we're going to discuss what it takes to go from being an SID to an AD. How do you navigate getting that promotion, and the value SIDs bring to the table beyond sports info? Mike, how are you doing so far?
I'm great, John. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us on today's panel. I hope that when we get to the breakout sessions, people will have questions for you on specific topics that you may cover in our discussion. As we navigate through the questions, I hope that people will kind of take some notes and say, let me ask Michael about that, or something specific to their position. And then hopefully you can navigate that conversation well with them as we get to those breakout sessions later. But before that, we'll kind of just jump into the easy question off the top. Being in that administrative role, some of it maybe even early on in your career, what made you think you would be a good fit, or you wanted to pursue something like that, maybe beyond or in addition to sports info?
I've been around athletics all my life. Both my parents are coaches. My mom was actually the athletic director of my high school for a while, so I saw that side of it, saw what she was doing. I've always kind of been involved in athletics outside of just playing sports in high school. I helped run the concession stand. I guess was my first foray into event management. My senior year, I ran the concession stand for basketball and wrestling, so I kind of saw that set up, breakdown sort of thing. So I've always been interested. When I was at Northern Illinois, that's when I knew I wanted to get into administration. I like sports information. That's where I got my start, but I wanted to kind of branch out and go farther. And that's when I decided to go back to grad school at Florida State, because I knew I had to concentrate. I went back to be a GA from being a full-time employee. I just knew myself. I knew I would concentrate on it and do a better job if I was fully committed to that. Still heavily involved. Even though you're supposed to work 20 hours as a GA, I was working 40 and 50.
We all know that 20-hour limit doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. But you do it because you love it. Because especially at Florida State, when you're involved in so many things, big football games and basketball games and soccer and baseball. So I was really just involved in everything. But I was concentrating mostly on my academics. I wasn't traveling as much with sports. So I just knew I wanted to get into administration at some point. And I knew I was going to need an advanced degree that usually most positions require a master's.
How did that MBA, help you maybe even in discussions about taking other steps, or, maybe navigating interviews or having broader discussions with other ADs? Where did that MBA kind of help you in your career so far?
Well, it helped because, like I said, it just diversified my offerings. Again, I had never really done much with business operations for an athletic department, but having the MBA and having the accounting classes, having the management classes, gave the people at Armstrong confidence to let me run the business office, and really, dive in and help develop budgets. When I got there, the budgets were kind of just all over the place. There wasn't much accountability. So we put together some, they call it budget blueprints, where coaches laid out their spending for the year, and then it was my job to track it and make sure, I would go, see what we had, the university had, and its, accounts payable, and double check all those. So I learned some accounting practices. So that really helped me market myself to be, again, it's just maybe more marketable. I wouldn't get that job probably at Armstrong if I don't have an MBA.
Talk about a little bit of maybe, you're on the younger side at that point, or it's your first crack at an assistant AD role. How do you navigate those conversations with, your AD or assistant AD about wanting to get into a role beyond sports info? What kind of action steps do you take to, showcase your interest and then prove that, you maybe can perform in that role?
First off, you have to prove that you can do your current role well. I had to show that, hey, I can do this. Whether it's being an SID, showing that you've got command of the department and what you're doing and doing that well. I think that's the first step. Because if you're not performing well, then and it goes beyond just the annual reviews where you get to check boxes. Yep, doing well. You have to kind of show that you're doing well. And sometimes it's volunteering for things. Getting on committees on campus, getting on committees within your athletic department, and then asking for, sometimes it's just asking for experience. I would ask, hey, can I go to this meeting? I'll just sit in the corner. I won't say anything. I won't contribute. I just want to sit and be in the room. Or, hey, can I be on that teleconference? Can I be on that phone call that you're having with commissioners, other ADs, the president's staff? And then asking for more duties. That's what I started to do. I started asking for, hey, can I take this on? Can I, Armstrong, we were fortunate to host a number of championships. So I asked, can I be the tournament director? I'd like to be the person that runs, runs the tournament. So taking on responsibilities is a big thing. And then having those conversations and laying out, I would start to say to my bosses, hey, my goal is to be an athletic director. How can you help me out? What can, is there stuff you can do? If it's tasks, if it's responsibilities, maybe it's network events, maybe it's going to NACDA and COSIDA, having those opportunities throughout the way.
Michael, what about, sharing your work with ADs or other people in the department? I think that's something that maybe sports information directors, athletic communication directors maybe struggle with because we're always promoting others and it's hard to promote ourselves. Be curious your thoughts on that aspect of, not even really promoting yourself, but just kind of giving an extra nudge of, hey, this is what I've been doing in our department lately. How do you go about that? And I guess maybe the question is in a professional or the right way, and at least in your opinion.
Yeah, it's tough because, like you just said, we're naturally promoting other people. We're not used to promoting ourselves. I can't remember who it was, but at COSIDA, they would have like a kind of an attaboy email file where they would keep the good things that happened. Like if they got into the newspaper, they would kind of throw those things into a file. So they had them on file so they could say, hey, this is what we've been doing. I think a little bit, especially the way our jobs have transitioned now, where especially, at Division III, we're so much involved with social media. We can kind of keep track. I personally keep track of our social media metrics every month on our website metrics. So I can say, hey, this is the growth. I'm showing these numbers. It's not I'm not just saying, hey, the Instagram account's doing well. It's, hey, this is our growth. This is our engagement. These are the things we're doing. And things like that. And just kind of, reminding people, you come up for your annual review. That's one of the best possible ways. It's, and sometimes you don't have to verbally say, hey, this is what I'm doing. You can kind of just write a list and say, hey, just want to let you know that I'm on this committee for COSIDA. I'm on this committee for the university. And then, this is how we're growing, the steps I'm doing.
So that leads me to my next question. You talked a little bit about your interim AD role in a previous stop, but you've also been an interim AD at one of the other Johnson & Wales campuses. Talk to me a little bit about that overall experience, and then we'll kind of break down some questions beyond that.
Sure. So the second experience was much better than the first experience. The first experience was it was crazy. But the second experience went a lot smoother. It helped to know the network of the schools, for starters, so I could hop in. So I got a call this August from Mel Graff. She's Associate Dean of Students, and she oversees athletics. And Denver needed an AD. But the biggest thing was they're going through the transition from NAIA to D3. Mike Gallegos, who's the associate AD out there, is doing a great job with the transition, but that needs to be his primary focus. I feel like if they hadn't been going through the transition, he could have been the interim AD and just kind of kept the ship going. But with the problems of, the process to go from NAI to D3 is gigantic. It's tons of paperwork, it's interviews, it's all these things that you're just not aware of. So they asked me to go out there for the fall and kind of just make sure they're going in the right direction, keeping the ship going in the right direction. So I was flattered that they thought highly enough of me to send me out there for the fall term and help them keep going until they found a permanent replacement. But it was good to just build some staff camaraderie. A lot of what I did was just listening. Like, hey, what do you guys want out of this? What do you want your next AD to be? How do you want them to be a part? And so that was one of the biggest things, just kind of unifying the campus, because it was just very segmented. They're having some internal problems with trust and getting everybody on the same page. So that was probably my biggest thing, is just to unify the staff and kind of get it caught up so where that when the person that got hired came in, they were, I hope they were like a couple of weeks into it, because I just left them with a huge Google Doc of like, hey, these are the things I've noticed. These are the things we're working on. These are where you need to pick up the ball and get it rolling.
Do you think that being in the SID seat before going into that role, obviously you've had a number of experiences, but do you think that the characteristics of an SID boded well for that type of position? You look at our roles where we're supposed to listen first. We're supposed to have communication with tons of departments. We are, navigating tons of relationships within our office and out of our office. Did that help you? And then what other kind of skill sets helped you in the role?
Certainly, again, listening was a big thing. Like, one of the first things I did over the first 2 weeks is I had an appointment with every member of the staff, assistant coaches, head coaches, trainers, whoever it was. I got them on my schedule, and again, just listened, and then tried to kind of get an idea of the common themes. But yeah, it certainly helps, because one of the things too is usually, if you're lucky, you get hired in the summer, you can kind of ease your way into it. But like, especially when I got hired here, I got hired in mid-October. We were a week away from conference championships. So I had to, and not even a week from hockey season starting. So I had to really jump in and like get to know people and really, learn as much as I could as fast as possible. So that certainly helped. Obviously, everyone works a ton of hours, but, having that work ethic of, having to work long hours certainly helped. And then too, it helped that I've had several different roles, game operations and facility management and SID. So I can kind of sit back and look at everything and get a good grasp of what we're doing. One part that was new to me is they play all their stuff off campus except for volleyball and basketball. So that was new, having to work with third parties for facilities and scheduling and seeing what we could do. So it was good to kind of learn more about that. But again, like you said, just a lot of listening and trying not to, one of the things I feel like as SIDs, we're kind of problem solvers. So trying not to hop in too fast with solutions and more just like listening and just bringing people together. Because again, there's a lot of things. There wasn't a whole lot of communication amongst the staff. Like, they weren't having weekly staff meetings, like the core group. There wasn't a whole lot of, I don't say problem solving, but staff meetings were just kind of like talking in circles. So I really went in with like a focus and a plan. Like, this is the agenda. We're going to stick with it. We're going to, if you have things you want to talk about, bring them to me. I feel like I don't think they thought like they're being heard. So I think a lot of it just making sure they were being heard.
What else do you think, in your time, even in both roles, both interim AD roles, have you learned that would be important for the membership to know beyond what you just mentioned? Is there anything that we missed or left out?
No, no, a lot of listening. I would say if you're interested in, being involved, compliance, learning more about compliance and NCAA manual is helpful, even if you kind of dabble a little bit. I went down more rabbit holes with things than I ever thought. And it's different. You feel like you think you know, or not know, you know everything, but you're ready. But things just kind of get thrown at you left and right. Like, coaches come in and now it's, when you're SID and even if you have some sport oversight, you kind of think you're ready for it. But now all of a sudden, everyone's problem is now your problem. Again, a lot of it's listening, it's problem solving, and just one of the biggest things I would say is you have to learn to ask for help. From people across campus, from people in your network. That was just one of the biggest things for me when I moved from sports information director to associate AD. I took on oversight of facilities, game operations, club sports, campus recreation, intramurals, plus both of our equestrian teams. And I tried to do all of that and maintain like a crazy SID schedule. And I was bad at delegating. I think that's another thing that we don't do as well as SIDs is delegate, that you have to let people do their jobs. And so that first year I got exhausted. We hit April when it came time for spring sports and I was just wiped out. I think it was the first time I ever felt burnout because I tried to do it all myself.
Michael, maybe just give some last words of advice here on, maybe getting that promotion or having that conversation with your AD about, wanting to do more. Just, give us some last piece of advice on that, if you will.
Be confident and believe in yourself that you can do the job. I think that's one of the biggest things. I mean, that for me goes all the way back to going from being a student worker to being an intern at Ohio University. I had confidence in myself that I could do it. Same thing when I was interim AD at Armstrong. I've been an assistant SID for a number of years. Had been an assistant AD for only 2 years, but believed in myself. And when I got a call from the vice president, funny story, he and I were talking. He's like, the president would like to speak to the staff tomorrow. Can you organize that? Have them come in? Sure, no problem. We hang up. He called me back like 30 seconds later. He goes, oh yeah, do you want to be the interim AD? And so, I'm like, you could have led with that probably first. But I believed in myself. I believed that, that I had, I'd proven myself in my other roles. And then again, having the, being able to ask. And sometimes you get no. I've asked to be a part of meetings, especially even during everything that's going down with the coronavirus. I've asked to be in some higher level meetings because I want to know what's going on, but also want to get experience. And I've been told no. And I'm fine with that because some things are, there's some sensitivity on different things, but you have to ask. And that's the thing, because most people, you have to ask. Most people aren't going to just say, hey, Michael, do you want to come to this meeting? They're going to, maybe they may tell you, I need you to go to this meeting. But a lot of times you have to ask. If you don't ask, they're not going to know. And maybe you don't get invited to that meeting the first time, but maybe there's another meeting. Maybe there's another opportunity down the road that now they know that they're paying attention to. And again, we're so busy, especially at Division III and in Division II as well. We're not big staff, so all of us are kind of just cranking and going. And that's not just the SIDs, that's the ADs, that's the trainers, there's vice presidents and deans. So they're not going to really know perhaps unless you say something. Maybe if you're in your interview and you first go on campus, they say, what's your 5 or 10-year plan? If you mention, down the road, I'd like to be an athletic director, they might think about that. But once you get in the role, they're probably not thinking about that. So you have to make the ask.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike, for your wonderful insight. We'll catch you back in a breakout room shortly, I assume. But again, thank you for bringing us through sort of, the SID to AD roles, some of that promotion stuff, and then just overall trying to navigate those conversations. So really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it.
Joining me now to discuss building your personal brand is Katie Mooji, the Assistant Commissioner for New Media and Technology with the Missouri Valley Conference, of course, with roots in Division III from her Southern Collegiate Athletic Conference days. Katie, thanks so much for taking some time to discuss personal branding with us. I guess really just off the top, let's define that. What exactly does personal brand mean to you?
I think your personal brand is kind of, I don't want to say how you're known, but I think that's a big part of it, obviously. I think it really has to do with what people think of when they hear you. I tweeted out something yesterday when knowing I was coming into this, and Kashan Shah said one really good thing, and it's, if someone's at a dinner party and they say, Katie Mooji, she's really blank, what do you want them to say? And to me, that's the perfect way to define personal brand, is how people see you, what kind of image you want to put out to the world.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you are a household name in athletic communications. I mean, you are at the forefront of this field for all sorts of reasons. I mean, you're talented. You've got that personality that everyone just loves to be around, infectious smile. All of those things kind of go into what you're talking about. Those things that are, what are those first couple of things that people say about you and who Katie is? So, of course, talked about being in Division III and kind of progressing through your career. How do you think that your personal brand has helped propel you through your career?
Oh, it's been huge. I think I got into the business, I guess now 6 years ago, which is crazy to think. But I got into the business 6 years ago, and that was kind of when SIDs were really being, I don't want to say forced, but really being challenged with taking on social media and new media and things like that. And that was kind of where I came from. I was coming out of college and doing that. And so that really helped me, just because the STAC, we were able to be kind of on the forefront of a lot of that with Division III. And so then having people come to me for advice and being able to get out there and give advice and give lessons and teach people things really got my name out there, to the point where I was now referred to as Katie from Facebook at COSIDA. Unfortunately, Sam Atkinson will love that I mentioned that. But I think getting my name out there and being able to help people, not just because I spoke up a lot and said a lot of things, but because I was giving advice and teaching people and trying to do things like that. And then that helped me. My current job, Ryan Davis from the Missouri Valley, was at the Heartland Collegiate Athletic Conference before, another D3 conference. And he'd known my work. We didn't really know each other. We'd probably met 1 or 2 times at meetings in the couple of years we kind of overlapped. And then when he was at the Valley, he called me up and said, "Hey, we have a job opening up. We think you'd be great at it." And I never worked with him. I'd never really interacted with him more than maybe saying 1 or 2 things at a meeting, but he knew just from my brand on Facebook, me on Twitter, things like that, that this is my field and this is kind of what I was good at. And that really obviously got me a job.
Well, I think it's so important because sometimes as SIDs, we're so conscious about, I don't want to overshare my own work because I don't want to feel like I'm tooting my own horn. But I mean, people need to see the content that you're putting out there, and that's part of building that personal
Absolutely.
brand. You should be proud of the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
So talking about it, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in establishing that? I mean, as a young professional, trying to find your way, what have been some of those biggest challenges that you've seen?
I think there's always a little bit of one, especially on the SIDs are so into these Facebook groups. And I think that's a big thing, but I think it's knowing boundaries, I guess, and knowing like, when are you getting to be annoying versus just being helpful or being interactive and engaging. And that's a big thing, is just knowing, you don't need to comment on everything, just have people know your name. Give valuable insight, give quality over quantity. That's a huge thing. And then this is another thing that came up on Twitter yesterday too, is being personal. You don't want to just be a robot who retweets your school account and all the work you do there. You can obviously share your work if you're proud of it, and when you are proud of it, you should be. Share work that you're proud of, but maybe add commentary to it versus just retweeting it and say, I made this video and this is really cool, like behind the scenes this happened, or things like that. And I think that's a big challenge that like you have to learn, obviously, when you're doing this, is not to just be a robot for your school. I mean, you want to promote what you're doing, but your personal brand is you. You are not your school. You are a human. And Lene Phillips in Indiana said the same thing last night, and she's great at social media and great at branding. And you are you. And when you do your personal brand, you might move on from that school later in life. So you don't want your whole identity to be tied into one place. And that's something you have to learn. It might not be the easiest thing to learn, because a lot of people do wrap their identity up a lot with where they're working. That's a challenge I overcame, I think, and I think people are overcoming.
Definitely. You mentioned that a lot of people have come to you for advice over the years. You've given a lot of advice through different panels and webinars and such. But what advice would you try to give to those who are looking to establish their personal brand, or maybe have some questions regarding that? What advice would you give?
I think at the very basic level, figure out what you want your name to be on social media. Mine's just Katie Mooji. All my accounts, social media accounts, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, everything I've created is Katie Mooji. It's easy to find me. It's recognizable. If you know me on one, you probably know me on the others. That's the very basic level advice I can give to you. The other would be to really have fun with it and engage with people. I think a really good way to get your name out there is engaging with strangers. If you follow people who do a lot of the similar work you do, you might not know them in person, but you follow them because you admire their work, or you want to learn from them, engage with them. Don't just like things, like actually be like, oh, great advice, or wow, I really like this, or hey, I did this too, here's mine, whatever. That's how I've met so many people that I'm friends with, really good friends with to these days, is just engaging with them on social media. And then we start messaging, and then we start texting, and then we start being friends, and we finally meet in person at some point. And I think that's a huge way to just grow your network, to grow your brand and get your name out there, is engaging with people, strangers, friends, whatever it may be, and ask people to engage with you. Don't be scared to tweet out and say, hey, I'm doing an interview for personal branding tomorrow. Who has advice? Because it'll help.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. It's all about networking. And we're all so willing to give back. And that's the fun of it. We're missing that part with convention this year, but we've still got the opportunity to network. And we're so excited because we're going to continue this discussion coming up in just a bit. So Katie, thanks so much for all of your help here with this. We're so excited. You're fantastic. We can't wait to continue this discussion. Thanks again for joining us. Once again, everyone, thanks so much for joining us for the start of Division III programming for COSIDA 2020 Virtual Convention. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. Make sure that you tune into the rest of Division III programming throughout the next couple of days, and tune in for Virtual Convention next week.
Yeah, we're super excited to continue these conversations. Our session is not done yet, so don't just click out of this web browser. We've got links below with each of those breakout sessions to talk to our panelists, to really get to know them. We want this to be very interactive, right? Sean mentioned it at the top. This is a really unique time for us, but a great opportunity to chat with folks in the industry, get to know some other perspectives, and just meet some people in those meeting rooms as well. So get to know people. All those links are below. So click those links in the description. Find a room that's interesting for you, and we'll see you in a couple seconds.